But what did you think of the two tight ends? Because to me, the year ended with everybody going, Tyler Kroft can't block, Tyler Kroft this, Tyler Kroft that. And the Niners did invest a third in Cameron Latou and a seventh in Braden Willis. They also had the gold helmet designation on Willis. And the talk was they may have picked him as high as the third round if they hadn't gone with Latou instead. What do you think of those two rookie tight ends? Which of the two do you think makes the bigger impact?
It's funny because it's people always get so caught up in draft capital, right? That it's like horrible if your 7th round pick ends up being better than your 3rd round pick right away, or they make a bigger impact. But I really don't see it that way. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where they're taken as long as they make an impact. And I really think that Braden Willis has a quicker path to making an impact, especially because of the versatility he brings. He can play H-back, he can play inline, he can kick out to the slot. They asked him to do a ton of things at Oklahoma, and he excelled pretty much everywhere. I thought he was a more than willing and capable blocker as well. And it checks out that they would have that gold helmet designation on him, because when you talk to the coaching staff there at Oklahoma, he was one of those guys where he was out there putting in a tremendous amount of work, where they had to literally yank him off the practice field because he was exerting so much energy in practice week after week. They're like, dude, you got to save it for Saturdays. And that just kind of screams towards the culture that the 49ers are building there. I do like Latou. I think he's a guy where maybe there's a little bit more development and the upside may be higher in the long run. But tight end is such a hard position. Like, to me, the two hardest positions to transition to at the NFL are corner and tight end. And I think that a lot of times it takes guys till year 2, year 3 to really hit their stride at that position, save for some, rare exceptions to the rule. I think Willis right now has a clearer path to earlier work, but I think that Latou has very high upside. And I know he's another guy that McLuhan seemed to really like as well and had very, very good things to say about. I trust his eyes and his judgment as much as anybody else's that I've encountered in the football world. So that definitely should bring some optimism for that pick, in my opinion. But, it was time to make a change in the depth behind George Kittle. I think that they had capable players there. I think Ross Dwelly's been really good for them and been very dependable. I thought Kroft kind of got a bad rep just because of that one play in that one game where he missed a block. And unfortunately, it kind of, that people choose that as the sticking point that derailed the season. But they haven't been young and they haven't really had athletes behind Kittle. And I think that's where there's a welcome change, where you're going to have a little bit more athletic upside in those depth roles. You can roll out that 22 personnel and have just a little bit more the 12 personnel, my apologies, and have a little bit more upside physically with the guys in the depth there. Sometimes when you're doing prep, there'll be a stat or a number that jumps out and makes you go, what? That's incredible. The stat that I was looking at as I'm doing my deep dive on the Niners, getting ready for camp, guess how many receptions 49er tight ends not named George Kittle had all of last year? I'm going to say under 15.
7.
7. Wow. Yeah. 7
receptions for Niner tight ends not named George Kittle last year. That is ridiculously low. I mean, to me, if I'm Dwelly or Warner, I may just be renting my apartment this year, and I may want it on a month-to-month, because I think there's a very good chance that Latou and Willis wind up taking the jobs away from Warner and Dwelly in this camp. And I know they like Warner as a blocker. I know they like Dwelly as a receiver, but I think they're looking for upgrades, and I think they drafted a couple guys. And I talked to the tight end coach Fleury, and he said, hey, don't forget, Latou has played very little tight end, so his upside growth is significant. Every time we look at him, he's better. So, and he flashed a little bit in the OTAs. Couple last ones before we let you go. What was your thinking on Ronnie Bell? It's like for 2 years in a row now, Jordan, I've gone to a pick that when it was made, I couldn't stand it. And then later I was like, great pick. 2 years ago, it was Brock Purdy. And when I heard that name, I was like, really? They're going to go for this kind of weak-armed, college, backup, career backup is they're going to invest a draft choice in him. And then, my buddy who had been in Ames and scouted him said, hey, look, if this guy were an inch taller, if this guy had a little bit more arm strength, I would love this guy as like a second or third round pick. And I said, okay. And he said, here, I'm going to send you some films. I want you to watch this guy, watch him intently. So I watched him. I thought, yeah, he looked pretty good. Then I, he went to Jacksonville, got, more velocity on the ball. And the rest is history. And Brock was tremendous. I mean, as good as any rookie quarterback I can remember. This year, I really didn't like Ronnie Bell. And I thought to myself, why? Why Ronnie Bell? And then the more I watched him in the minicamp, I thought, this guy's going to make the team. And then when I read his backstory and how his father is currently a collegiate wide receiver coach for like Central Illinois or Western Illinois, or I forget which school it is. And it's like, yeah, you know what? You can see that. You can see how fundamentally sound he is and everything that he does. And I'm become a huge Ronnie Bell fan. I think he's going to give Juwan Jennings, Tay Martin, and anybody else who's in the running for that last wide receiver spot a run for their money this summer. Give me your Ronnie Bell thoughts. Did you like the pick initially?
I really liked the pick initially. I had him in a couple mocks that I did before the draft because I thought once you get to, I think they had 4 picks in the 7th round this year.
Right.
So once you get to that point, it's kind of, you can't really be too upset at, if there's a lower ceiling or a lower floor or their physical traits aren't there. A lot of times these guys are projected to go in that round for a reason. But the more and more I watched Ronnie Bell, the more I just felt like this guy doesn't really do any one particular thing that stands out to me. He just does a lot of little things really well that when you look at the complete picture, to me, that equated to a guy that would have a future in the NFL and could, be a mainstay in the league just based on the fact that he had such a high floor and he had the ability to just win and do the little things. I think he's going to project as more of a slot receiver personally. I think that he's somebody that could give the 49ers kind of something that they haven't had the last few years. I think that Juwan Jennings has been really good as that kind of, big slot, but he's also he's a big guy. He's not somebody that really has the, that change of direction and, shiftiness that somebody who has a smaller stature is naturally going to have a little bit more of an advantage in creating. So when I look at Ronnie Bell, he's a guy who I think has a future on the team just based on the fact that he fits the profile of an NFL guy that, maybe isn't a household name and isn't somebody that you're talking about week after week, but he shows up, he does his job, and he's going to do all the little things that earn him a roster spot. So I'm with you. I think he will make the final 53 this year. Again, a lot of this stuff, it's really hard to say. He could go into camp and he could look terrible, and then that prediction looks awful a month from now. But without, seeing that up close yet, I think he's a guy who absolutely projects as somebody who could be on the 53-man roster as soon as the season.